Hello friends, today we are standing up for a very important video because I'm going to be giving what is essentially therapy dupes in the form of books to every single person that has appeared in Love is Blind Season 4 because we know they need it. And before anyone asks, yes, I am the best person to give these book recommendations as a 23-year-old booktuber and poet who is perfectly mentally healthy. Also, just a heads up, as I am recording this, I have not watched the reunion yet, but I will be giving spoilers for the season up until that point. So if you've not watched the full season up until the reunion, watch it and then come back because you'll appreciate it a lot more. So let's start with the couple that made me full-on ugly cry during their wedding, Brett and Tiffany. And for everyone else, I will be giving the individuals of the couples book recommendations rather than the couples. However, for Brett and Tiffany, I was like, I need to give it together. Because I feel like if I gave one of them a book, they would make the other one read it anyways. And I feel like then they would form their own like little book club and chat about the book. And to me, as a non-Black POC, they really do embody just like Black joy and Black love and what can happen when two emotionally healthy people of color come together. So I'm gonna give them some options. Firstly, I think it'd be really cute for them to just read like a straight up Black romance because I feel like they can have those little moments of like turning to each other and being like, oh my god, this book is exactly like us. So I'd recommend them Instructions for Dancing by Nicola Yoon because this book had me straight up ugly crying in the exact same way in the final few chapters. Oh my god. The focus of this book is Evie, who is a young girl who is completely disillusioned by love after a very messy divorce between her parents. But then she accidentally stumbles across this dilapidated dance studio and ends up signing up for a dance competition and gets partnered with X. Yeah, that's his actual name, who's this tall, dark, and handsome man who may just end up breaking down those barriers. A lot of this book also focuses on the family aspect of falling in love, which I think is often really important to a lot of BIPOC people and was clearly very important to Brett and Tiffany as well. Also, shout out to Herbert because oh my god, I love the way that man speaks. Anytime he came on screen, I was just so delighted by his presence. Like, I'd literally read the phone book. What? No, I would hear him read the phone book if he could, because like, oh, just love the way he says things, man. But to be honest, I can see Tiffany liking this romance book more than Brett, and I really want both of them to be happy. So my second option for them is Love in Color by Bolu Babalola. This is an amazing collection of short love stories that reimagines West African mythology, Middle Eastern, and even Greek mythology, and brings these myths into like a present day setting to explore love. Now we're going to take a very sharp turn and talk about Jacquelina or Jackie, and look, I don't want any ads for this, okay? I know there's a lot of controversy around this, but guys, she needs actual therapy, and I think she knows that too. Like, she really needs this therapy dupe, and like, honestly, I needed this therapy dupe, okay? After how many times my blood boiled when I was watching her on the TV, like, screaming, man. And I know she said that, like, she's been going through a difficult time with her, like, dad's cancer diagnosis and her brother, you know, just coming out of prison, but she needs to learn that, you know, no matter what kind of tough time you're going through, it's not an excuse to take it out on other people, or not like take it out, but just not communicate properly with other people in your life. But you know, everyone deserves to learn and grow from their mistakes and that. So I thought I'd be nice for this recommendation and recommend this book, which is Self-Care for Tough Times. And I feel like Jackie strikes me as the kind of person who wouldn't like to read like a quote unquote proper book anyways. And I think this is really nice and accessible because it's got a lot of like color printed pages and illustrations that tell you how to look after yourself in tough times. And I feel like she would probably need that to be able to like give that kindness and love to herself and then be able to extend it to others. Now it's time to talk about Marshall, my boy, okay? You want to know why he's my boy? Because he's into poetry. He writes poetry, okay? That's my shit. This is where I'm coming to shine, okay? This is the person I'm gonna give the best book recommendation to. Like, please, Marshall, please take all my poetry books, okay? Let's read poetry together. Let's chat about poetry. And because Marshall is clearly a man of taste, I'm gonna recommend him a poet of taste who is also a man of good taste. I don't know where I'm going with this. Basically, Yomi Shote is one of the loveliest poets that I've ever met, and I feel like if him and Marshall were to chat, they'd like get on really well. And Mannerism is Yomi Shote's debut poetry collection that explores what it's like to be a black British man, essentially. And it talks about the kind of stuff that you would expect, like misrepresentation and stereotyping, but also the intricacies of code switching and how difficult that can be, as well as Caravaggio, who is this Italian painter from the Baroque and Renaissance period, who was also quite controversial in his time. So it's interesting how Yomi is able to kind of bring all those elements together, and I feel like Marshall would really vibe not only with the kind of base level relatability of this book, but also the part about Caravaggio, because he seems like someone who would be interested in that kind of stuff. Next up is Micah, and I have really mixed feelings about Micah, because she didn't really seem like a great person to me at the start because of her interactions with Kwame, both in and out of the pods, and then also in the beginning stages when she was essentially playing mean girl with Irina. But when she was in her relationship with Paul, I feel like she was like a completely different person. And when she got left at the altar, that shit had me tearing up, because I was like, oh damn, like that was really hurtful. And I thought they were like really in love, and no one really deserves to be treated that way. I feel like she also really needs to learn how to like communicate with her friends and set those boundaries, because like Shelby really was invading in that relationship, and it pissed me the fuck off when she was laughing as her friend was getting left at the altar. So for Micah, I would recommend this very heavy book, which is Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown. And it is very heavy, so I'm just going to put it down now. And as the title might imply, it plays off of that idea of maps, and I really like the way that Brené Brown lays it out, because she takes us through like 80 something different emotions and levels of emotional intelligence to get back to the core root of what our issues might be and what might be causing those problems. And then from there, she sets up frameworks for us to be able to articulate and express those emotions in a really lovely way, to be honest. Now with Micah, of course, we need to talk about Paul next. And I feel like he was a lovely person. Like, I didn't have many issues with him, but I think, and this is something that I also personally struggle with, he needs to get out of his head a bit and listen to his heart more and stop being so over analytical and overthinking things. And I think a lot of the time when you overthink stuff, at least in my experience, it comes from a place of fear. Now, I was going to recommend Paul some poetry, but from my experience, STEM people hate poetry. So instead, I'm going to recommend a book called My Friend Fear by Mirali Patel. And this is part memoir, part self-help. And this book is told through these gorgeous watercolor illustrations, which I thought, you know, Paul might vibe with. Environmental scientist, water, you can make that lose connection yourself. And it's a really lovely book because it actually talks about how you can use your fear to help you move forward in life rather than letting it hold you back from those experiences that you might be missing out on. Bliss similarly seemed like a really lovely person, but I think there was a lot going on with her family dynamic that I think a lot of BIPOC and or immigrant families or kids might be able to relate to. Because when she was talking to her dad about Zack, I was like, I've definitely heard some uncles say stuff like that before. So for Bliss, I'd recommend The Mismatch by Sarah Jafari, which is literally one of my all-time favorite books. If you haven't noticed, I always keep it here on my shelf. And it's one of my favorite books of all time because despite the fact that I am British Indian and the protagonist of this book is British Iranian, this book was probably the one that has made me feel the most represented ever. The Mismatch follows Soraya, who is a British Iranian girl who has never dated, never kissed, and she's graduating uni, and she decides that she is going to try and kiss Magnus, who is the quote-unquote jock of her uni, for her first kiss. But they end up in a kind of relationship together. And a dual narrative that follows this is Soraya's mum, Neda, and her journey from Iran to Brighton and immigrating in the UK. And this is honestly just such a good story of how love and family can overlap and sometimes get in the way when you are in an interracial relationship. Zack, look, I get it. Okay, look, there's an owl on my bookshelf too, okay? I love owls as well, but for God's sake, man, get that cringy picture off your wall of the owls and the samurai swords. I have never before looked at a piece of art and gone, that is disgusting, but that is something that I looked at and went, that is disgusting. Now, from the outside and from my point of view, Zack seems like someone who is dangerously close of falling over the edge into the black hole of self-help Jordan Peterson books, and we want to get him away from there because no one else needs to go down that rabbit hole. And also, I think it's time to get away from the toxic rhetoric that if you just power through something, you'll be alright. Because as we saw with Irina, that doesn't always work. So I'd really like to recommend Zack some poetry because I feel like he seems like the kind of person who wouldn't be afraid to have those deep, intense conversations, maybe a little bit too intense. And this book, If All the World and Love Were Young by Stephen Sexton, I feel like would be perfect for him because it chronicles Stephen's tragic loss of his mother to cancer through video games and the world of a lot of Mario video games. Hence, if you can see the little Mario coin on the cover. Oh boy, we saved the best for last, which is Irina. Now, I've been thinking about how to say this in a way that doesn't sound mean, but I'm just gonna say it. She seems like a straight up bad person, guys. The real question is though, is there a book that will be able to redeem her and pull her back? Maybe? Lol? So, I don't know. I think the main thing that stuck out about Irina for me is that she's clearly very insecure about whatever. But I think she really needs to learn how to do right by herself and also other women, because I don't know if there was some like internalized misogyny going on with the way that she was acting towards the people around her. And so I will recommend the most basic feminist book I can think of and the most accessible feminist book I can think of, which is Women Don't Owe You Pretty by Florence Given. And like the chapters for this are perfect for her situation, I feel like, because there's literally one titled Refuse to Find Comfort in Other Women's Flaws, and I feel like that's exactly what she needs to do, as well as a whole other bunch of getting your shit together activities, but I'll leave that up to her. Also, as a side note, I know this book is not very intersectional, it's very white feminism, however, we are going low bar, extremely basic, so don't at me. Except I lied, because that wasn't the end, because I forgot to record Chelsea and Kwame's parts. And now we have to do it in a different outfit in this awful lighting, so let's go. So let's start with Kwame. There were a lot of big yikes moments with Kwame, like him flirting with Micah, him not showing his affection for Chelsea as much as she was showing affection for him, his singing.
Oh, it's out of tune.
But even after all that, I don't think he is a villain, or at least as much of a villain as everyone makes him out to be. But I do feel like he is one of those men who is straying into the waters of self-help. Like, I can just tell based on the way that someone dresses. If they wear like a grey jumper or a grey blazer, I'm like, that's the sign, you're about to read Jordan Peterson, let's get you out of there. So I would encourage him to take the road less travelled and read a good novel, particularly one about being from a diaspora, because I think one of the things that he was clearly experiencing on the show with his mum and his sister and his family was the idea of living between two cultures, and that's something that I can relate to as well. And it's really hard for a lot of BIPOC people when you're in a committed relationship to combine your relationship with your family's expectations. So for him, I would recommend Transcendent Kingdom by Yagasai because it focuses on one Ghanaian family who live in Alabama. And because the main character is a PhD student, I believe, in biology, it talks really nicely about how family and religion and science can merge together really well, or sometimes not very well. And I think that's something that, you know, he might be able to see a little bit of himself in and be like, oh, I get it. Now, with Chelsea, she seems like such a strong woman. Okay, I was like, she's clearly got her shit together. She knows what she wants. She's going after it. She's not afraid to express her femininity. Like, yes, come through. And in my opinion, she's probably the nicest person on the show outside of Tiffany and Brett. So I'm going to recommend her a romance book that also features a strong female lead that isn't afraid to go after what they want which is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And I feel like if you're already in the bookish space, you probably already know about this book because it's been talked about a lot. But if you don't, I will leave a link to one of my videos above if you want to learn more about that book. So yeah, for now, peace out from me and this crusty lighting. If you have enjoyed me roasting all these semi-famous people, then I think you may also enjoy my reading vlog here, where I read Hayley Williams' favourite book, and yeah, you'll see. And do let me know in the comments what you thought of the book recommendations. Would you give any more book recommendations to people on season 4? And let's just, share your thoughts on this season and heal from the collective trauma that we've all experienced by watching this show. And as always, I hope you're having a lovely day, and I will see you over there in the next video. Goodbye.